spectrum of game quality, you naturally have the good and the bad. But you've also got that one little gray area where a title is so broken and so bad that you can't help but get a chuckle out of it, or you somehow manage to find some form of enjoyment. Whether it's out of actual curiosity or some kind of masochistic pleasure, we managed to find some happiness in some of the worst titles. And today, I'll be trudging through a few that I personally believe are so bad, they're actually a bit amazing on some level. Just imagine an epic blending of Norse mythology and sci-fi with promises of innovative gameplay and only being the first chapter of a gaming trilogy. This is what Silicon Knights strived to deliver for over a decade. And after years of lawsuits and console/company hopping, it finally arrived on the 360 in 2008. And
pretty much that. It was a gigantic car crash, complete with the savory burning screams of agony.
For starters, the combat system is messed up, heavily relying on the right analog stick for combat while the bumper helps move the camera. On top of that is a lovely mixture of an unfinished story, clunky graphics, stiff animations, a drawn-out death sequence, having to spend 1 billion hours in menus, and just that feeling that no one bothered to test this project before it was released. It's honestly pretty laughable. However, that one saving grace that many will give props to is the audio. With top-notch music and an all-star cast of talented voice actors, from Steve Bloom and Nolan North to Crispin Freeman.
If they managed to get Troy Baker, we could have had the Holy Retro Replay duo working together again.
Pitfall, Harry!
Better slow your pitfall down.
By the way, I can't get off the rope. And jump. And we try.
Plus, I gotta admit, I'm genuinely curious what else this story had to offer because Silicon Knights was so determined to have this game be only 1/3 of a trilogy. Unfortunately, after a few too many embarrassing legal issues, the dream was laid to rest along with the company itself, leaving many of us hungry to know what might have been. Who knows? Maybe the sequel could have been intentionally good.
Hey guys, you want to hear a dumb joke? So, a basketball player, a martial artist, and a mummy walk into a bar, and they make a video game. The joke is that it's real. It's Shaq Fu.
Can you think of a dumber concept than Shaquille O'Neal going into a magical artist dimension to save a boy from an ancient mummy? Well, if you look at his movie history, probably. But in games? Not much worse. Shaq Fu was released in the mid-90s when Mortal Kombat fans / basketball stars / rapping genie Shaquille O'Neal decided to take his fame to a less violent fighting game. It featured Shaq as a normal basketball player trying to beat up baddies in an alternate world, which included several beings of mythical and overall weird origins. And I think that's part of this game's strange charm. It's such a Frankenstein of weird ideas that you can't help but appreciate the train wreck. Despite its now overall bad reception, it was actually pretty decently reviewed at first. The fast-paced combat and sprite work wasn't terrible. Sure, it was super simple compared to other fighting games, but it was never quite unplayable. And you can see how some people might have had a bit of nostalgia. Nowadays, we can see the game having a weird control scheme, unnatural character movement, and for some reason, dumbed down fatalities just so they can keep a teen rating for the game. After reading some developer notes, I can see that Shaq did put some care into the game, but ultimately it was a bust, which made it weird that the reboot of the series was successfully funded. Though, like most Kickstarter games, it didn't do well either. At least we got a DLC of Barack Obama fighting Kanye West in space.
Oh look, we found a dumber concept.
Y'all ready for this?
Coming in at number 8, standing 1 foot tall, it is the horror game with the plan. The Game Games radar called Best Worst Game of 2010. The game that a Guinness World Record for being the most polarizing survival horror game ever. It's Deadly Premonition!
Yesterday morning, the milk I poured in my coffee made a sign. It said, "Tomorrow you'll arrive in a place that will change your fate."
Yeah, this game is weird. First off, how is this a 2010 game? It looks ugly as butt. It looks like if Half-Life had Fallout's color palette. It looks like if Resident Evil was made by the creators of Sonic Boom. It looks worse than the Silent Hill HD collection.
Oh yeah, I went there.
So, what is this game? Well, it's a survival horror game where you play as Francis York, a detective investigating the murder of Anna Graham, a teenager from a Washington remote town. As you investigate this bizarre murder, you learn more about the town and the weird spirits that inhabit it. Honestly, the story and atmosphere have some impressive moments. If you read it as a Wikipedia summary, you would think it has a compelling story with a good mystery. At its best, it's like if Twin Peaks became an open-world horror game with Resident Evil gameplay. That is where it stops being good though. Like I mentioned, this game looks really bad. The environments look like they are from an early PS2 era, and York himself is more stilted than an enemy from GoldenEye. The gameplay is ripped straight from Resident Evil 4, but feels slower. This isn't really all that bad as the zombies are also slow and you can aim, but it feels weird after playing Resident Evil 4. The audio control is super janky, sometimes overshadowing the hilariously bad acting, especially from our Quaaludes overdose protagonist. And then there is the car. For a good portion of the game, you have to travel by car from area to area, which gets tedious, especially because it's so slow. At least the conversations from the car are pretty entertaining at times.
You remember the martial arts they used in that film? Called Sinanju? The ultimate in martial arts, using no weapons at all. Remo's Master Chun ran across water, remember? And he loved soap operas. Man, that was a good character.
Honestly, this game is functional, which is why it's so low. Its investigation sections are good, but the fighting feels slow. The story and atmosphere have their moments, but the graphics are crap. And then there's the car.
Chicks dig the car.
This is why Superman works alone.
Nintendo has many beloved franchises under their belt: Mario, Kirby, and of course, The Legend of Zelda. With over 19 major entries, The Legend of Zelda is Nintendo's second largest property. It's also host to multiple spin-offs. Many are highly praised by fans, and at worst, they're just kind of forgotten about. In 1988, Nintendo signed a contract with Sony to make a CD attachment for their upcoming console, the SNES. Nintendo apparently didn't like the terms of the deal as time went on and went over to Philips, Sony's industry rival, for a more favorable deal. Then in June 1991, Nintendo announced their new partnership right after Sony itself announced the SNES-compatible cartridge/CD console, the PlayStation. Needless to say, the crowd was shocked, as was Sony, who decided to take their ball home and make their own gaming console.
Sony, the electronics company, making a video game console. It'll never catch on.
Enter the Philips CDI exclusive titles: Link, The Faces of Evil, Zelda Wand of Gamelon, and Zelda's Adventure. A game series which is so bad that Nintendo refused to let it be a part of the official Zelda canon that is Hyrule Historia. But wait, you may ask, if these games are so terrible, what could possibly make them entertaining at all?
Well, the answer to that is... memes. It's always the memes.
Seriously, the amount of what the fuckery in these games has to be seen to be believed. The gameplay is non-existent. The graphics look like the animators were half drunk when drawing them, and the voice acting is somehow both stilted and hammy, which all helps, as the main reason these games make the list is because of just how crazy the cutscenes are. Of course, when you have Russians with a limited grasp of English to write your game, you get stuff like this.
Join me, Link, and I will make your face the greatest in Korodai, or else you will die.
Never mind. This is the greatest thing ever.
Honestly, these games are best played with a couple of friends so you can all experience the majesty of these animation blunders. It'll help to slog through uninteresting and broken gameplay. And heck, you can even make a drinking game out of it. Just be sure to have a designated driver on standby for when you all need to be rushed to the ER for detox.
None for you. You're the designated flyer.
The Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has had numerous spin-offs over the years, from pinball to kart racing to Olympic competitions with Mario. Even some of Sonic's side characters have gotten their own games. So after the success of Sonic Heroes, Sega decided that they weren't cashing in on the teenage crowd as much as they could. Thus, Shadow the Hedgehog got his own game in 2005. But Sega needed to up the ante, so what could they use to make this spin-off stand out from the crowd?
Guns. Lots of guns.
Yeah, for the first time in a Sonic game, you, as Shadow, could wield pistols, machine guns, and rocket launchers. Couple this with the darker toned storyline, and it's plain to see that Sega was attempting to make this entry as dark and edgy as possible to cater to a teenage audience. Or at least the teenagers who hung around Hot Topic too much. They even had Shadow curse.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
I don't know, maybe it's behind that Uzi you need to pump for some reason.
One of the better parts about the game is that the level design works off a large branching structure. Depending on what choices you make or objectives you complete, your final destination could be one of 10 overall. In fact, Sega went even further because each path you could take is unique, totaling at 326 possible different combinations, which, while quite excessive, I do at least have to give props for effort. Ultimately, this also meant you had to replay the first mission over and over to get each of the different endings, and that would be alright if the first mission wasn't so repetitive. It could have been overlooked if you only played for a few endings, but you needed to get each of the unique endings in order to unlock the true endgame. That means you would be seeing this first level a lot.
It's like Groundhog Day, but with guns.
This game is also host to all the major problems and positives that were present in 3D Sonic games. Stiff camera, touchy controls, the game taking control away from you while the character does a large loop-de-loop, or you activate one of the two special abilities that literally has you skip a good chunk of the level, which might accidentally kill you. Coupled with hammy voice acting and B-grade writing to fill out the cutscenes, you'll at least have a few good hours of entertainment on that alone. All in all, Shadow the Hedgehog is one of those games best played blasting Linkin Park and reliving your teenage angst.
I wish my hair was black.
The 3DO was an interesting little failure of a console, wasn't it? It marketed itself as the first truly 32-bit console and went as far to declare the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis as inferior kids' toys. The only problem was the price and few games to justify it. While it did admittedly have some games worth playing, the most unique title it had to offer was Plumbers Don't Wear Ties. The game's box proclaimed that it plays like a game and feels like a movie. Yeah, unless your definition of a game is clicking a menu every half hour or so, and your definition of a movie is a clip show with dialogue, not exactly accurate. What really puts it on the list is how much the game just seems to delight in how little it cares. The opening credits look like they were made in Microsoft PowerPoint 98, and the game constantly puts ridiculous filters over the scenes like someone came in and sabotaged the game's non-existent quality. And as you quote-unquote play through, it seems the game's sanity meter progressively gets lower. You get interrupted by a narrator wearing a chicken mask, a chase scene turns into a vacation spot, there's an impromptu BDSM session, a blooper in the middle of a serious scene, and two completely out of nowhere alternate endings, one where the main antagonist inexplicably turns out to be gay.
At least it was actually done in the source material this time. Take notes, J.K. Rowling.
Overall, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties clearly doesn't give a fuck about anything, and I kind of respect it for that. You know the shady dealer that tries to sell you bargain bin bootlegs of popular movies that capture like a third of the genuine article's charm at best? Well, meet their European cousins, Phoenix Games. Before their defunct in 2009, this company became laughably notorious for their cheap rip-off games inspired by Disney and popular titles people wish they could be playing instead. And for the most part, they all usually suffer from the same issues: animation and voice acting that resemble the product of a team of cokeheads.
Well, at least it's easier to tell where the budget went. Look at these final products and tell me I'm wrong!
One particularly something title includes Dalmatians 3. Honestly, it's not even fair to call this a game at all. More like a 45-minute movie with a few minigames sprinkled in along with some really misleading box art featuring characters that never actually appear, including a hideously watercolored Cruella de Vil.
I come to work and I have to look at this mess! I can make good graphics.
Then there's Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys. Once again suffering from bored voice acting and sloppy animation, it's also filled to the brim with boring minigames, head-scratching dialogue, and a few not very kosher design choices. But as bizarrely terrible as these games are, it's too much fun to look back at these and laugh at how something this absurd actually exists. Plus, it kind of says a lot when a company of 6 independent developers managed to produce something so infamous that it earns a spot in gaming history. Also, to be fair, it's rumored they did produce one good game. That was only made available in Italy. In a world wrought with nothing delicious to drink, one man stands for truth, justice, and the carbonated way. He is... Pepsi Man! Yes, Pepsi Man, Japan's mascot for Pepsi Cola. His mission is to find anyone who's thirsty and save them with the smooth refreshment that is Pepsi.
Which is fine by me.
We here at Fiery Joker Productions are not affiliated with Pepsi Cola Company nor any of their affiliates. Josh just likes Pepsi a lot more than Coke and has forced the rest of us to put up with it. Remember to drink responsibly, kids. Diabetes is no joke. Remember Wolford.
Naturally, with any mascot character in the 90s, it was popular to make a video game to hype up their brand even more. Thus, in 1999, the Japan-only release of Pepsi Man graced the gaming public. Pepsi Man is a runner game much like Temple Run or 8-Bit Runner. However, this game could almost be considered one of the progenitors for the game type. Like with most runners, it has you as the titular Pepsi Man running down a path dodging a bunch of obstacles, from open manholes to passing trucks to even running from a giant Pepsi can.
How could you do this to me, Pepsi? I thought we were special!
The game itself is short, consisting of 4 levels, with each having separate segments that have a change in gameplay, such as inverted controls or running towards the screen. Unfortunately, the obstacles that seek to ruin your day can become controller-breaking difficult. With how the game is programmed, you can sometimes be thrown into a situation where there is literally 0 chance to avoid any damage, all because you didn't sprint at the right time. Or some obstacles can even knock you backwards into a bottomless pit, resulting in an instant loss of life. The game requires you to have a meticulous memory of what obstacles are coming up next in order to plow through the level without getting hit. The high difficulty is the only reason this game would last you a while. Experienced players have on record been able to get through the game in less than 20 minutes. What makes this game enjoyable is just how goofy it is. You are a superhero whose only superpower is running real fast to give people Pepsi, but half the people you are saving are either stranded in a desert or survivors from a plane crash, or even an entire city is rioting because they can't get their favorite carbonated beverage. And if you thought product placement in some games was bad, this game has that in spades with an entire city dedicated to Pepsi. This, coupled with that overly catchy Pepsi Man theme, the game just oozes a silly amount of charm. Overall, the game in my opinion wasn't worth a retail release at the time it was made. It could have been one of those games that came with a 12-pack or something, but the amount of game you got out of it for its price wasn't worth it. Unless you still have a copy and can sell it on eBay for some sweet cash.
Licensed video games are never good.
Look, up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane!
It's
Superman 64! I liked it.
Okay, let's get this over with. I've talked about Superman 64 on multiple occasions, and yes, I know it is a bad game. Yes, I know that it is one of the worst games ever. Yes, I know the rings are bad and that it glitches and it has so many problems, but it's still fun on easy mode.
You lie! You lie!
Like I mentioned before, when you play on easy, the rings don't exist. So while there is a time limit, you aren't as constrained as you would normally be on regular mode and can explore the world as needed. The levels are actually okayly designed, and the gameplay, while still glitchy, has some merit as Superman can still fly, use heat vision, freeze enemies, and fight big bads from the comics like Darkseid or Brainiac. Plus, since the game is easier, you can just screw around by throwing cards or just fly around taking in the environment. There's also a multiplayer section which is kind of like Mario Kart 64. You know, items, you get to play as many different characters. Except Superman? Yeah, even as a kid, that was kind of hilariously weird to me. Also, I found an interesting glitch in the training mode. If you walk through the final ring and continue pressing forward on the control stick, you can actually fall through the floor and fly around underneath Metropolis. The main sections can be a bit cramped as you try and solve even more tedious puzzles in an area more inclined as a platformer than a sandbox flight simulator. And I will admit that as a platformer, I think it's on par with a Bubsy game. Not Bubsy 3D bad, but still pretty bad. But come on. You are still playing as Superman. When you're just flying around and fighting enemies in an open environment, it's still a lot of dumb fun. Sure, that Superman 3 equivalent of fun, but still the sort of dumb fun that you should expect out of a game like this. Hey, it wouldn't be on the list if it wasn't. And lo, from on high, the glitch gods did bestow upon us mere mortals the perfect mess of a video game. Truly, Sonic 06 only wishes it could be half as buggy as this glorious train wreck, or car wreck as the case may be, for no game before or since has been so beautifully broken. Amen. Big Rigs isn't so much a game as it is an experience. It is so riddled with bugs and glitches that it may be impossible to tell what the original intention of the developers was, which was actually to prove they can make a game with a limited budget. Yet somehow, instead of ruining the game, the bugs turned what may have been a boring driving simulation game into a work of art. Nothing is real. You can drive through just about everything, be it the trees, bridges that aren't even there, or entire buildings. You just go through them like some kind of ghost. Gravity doesn't exist, and inertia is a mere suggestion, allowing you to climb sheer cliffs in a way that makes the Mako from Mass Effect jealous. You can't even lose in this game because the AI freezes before the finish line, allowing you all the time you could ever want in exploring the hilariously busted environments. Even if you hack it so the AI crosses the finish line, the game crashes. It's almost like the game wants you to enjoy how much of a mess it is. And trust me, you'll put that time to good use. Years from now, people will look to this example of how not to code your video game and not to cash checks from unattainable promises you make to yourself. It deserves to be hung in museums around the world for how beautiful it is, both intentionally and unintentionally. We will never forget the story of Big Rigs, the story of failure and how it can be more beautiful than success. I'm the Fiery Joker, and remember that there is a diamond beneath some of the roughest, glitchiest, and most laughably bizarre bit of coal out there. Unless you're Okami.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
Cut!